Hello, Ravens fans, and welcome to our Eastern College Athletic Conference preview of the esports season. It's more of an outlook as we're kind of already going with things. I'm Aaron Schneider, the Sports Information Director at Anderson University, and joining us is our esports head coach Matt Burnstedt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, Aaron. I'm enjoying the snow we got going on outside. I might be sheltered in here for a little while, but enjoying it nonetheless, enjoying our season and our players.
Yeah, and we're recording this on a day where campus is closed. The roads are just absolutely piled in snow, but so we're home today, but still a good time to talk some esports.
Absolutely.
And I think for both of us, we've kind of seen we've got our own little crazy hectic things going on for the semester for different reasons, but it's good to get back going on to the same page and talk go through each of the games as we enter our ECAC season.
Yeah, absolutely. I said I'm ready to dive in and talk about some esports. As good as day as any for me.
Okay, so we had a couple of teams that did compete in the Collegiate Star League. One of them being Rocket League. Before we talk about their season, for those who don't know the principle in terms of Rocket League, if you could break that down for us.
Yeah, sure. So Rocket League consists at the competitive level on 3v3, and it's essentially soccer in an arena, a domed arena, and instead of people, you play with little RC cars. They could float, they could jump around in the air, boost around, do some crazy, insane tricks. But the goal is still the same, right? Get the ball in the goal, score as many points as you possibly can. Whoever has the most at the end ends up winning. So strategy wise, it's just the same as soccer, right? You have someone in the front, someone in the mid, someone in the back to try and defend. And the big difference is that the cars, because they're moving so fast and it's such a small arena, people are constantly switching. So the front guy might end up being the back guy after he misses a play. So he'll rotate around as opposed to soccer, where everyone kind of has their position in their quadrant of the field, if you will. Everyone's kind of fluid in Rocket League, but otherwise it's soccer with cars.
Yeah, and I was going to go into some of the since I've seen more of the Rocket League, we've had more matches with Rocket League than any of our teams. Basically, to me, there I've seen two things that are important in terms of the success. One being kind of the skill, the aerial moves, that those type of things and the other thing if not more important, that just the teamwork between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the mechanics per se in how you hit the ball depends on how the ball ends up being, bounced off of something, how fast it's hit, what angle it goes from. So for example, if you hit the ball with your tires, if you jump in the air and you spin your tires to hit the ball, that's a significantly softer hit than if you were to hit it straight on with your bumper. So there's a lot of technical prowess that goes into it as to, okay, well, if the ball's just above the goal, do I hit it with my tires? Do I hit it with the top of my car? Do I hit it with the side of my car? And the angles are all what matters. So what angle you come at hitting it, if you hit it with only your front right tire, then it's going to go downwards to the right. But if you hit it with both of your tires, it'll go just straight down. So there's a lot of hours that our players have put in order to figure out every different combination, every different angle, and how the ball reacts to those types of situations. And then beyond that, it's like you were talking about, they have to build their own team synergy and how to know when to rotate, who should rotate, when they can't be at the same place at the same time, and who has the other person's back in the event that they don't have boost, which in this game is very significant because they're playing at such a high pace that they need boost in order to do some of these crazy aerial tricks to outplay their opponents.
And I guess one more thing I forgot to kind of cover, and I think you might have gotten into this already, that just the defensive element. I know on the play-by-play, there's a lot of talk and always making sure there's someone's has the ability to get back if they need to.
Yeah, so it's almost like if soccer never had a goalie, but everyone's the goalie all at the same time. So all three players aren't necessarily always on attack or always on defense. Like I said, it's kind of a fluid deal. So they all need to be competent in the fact that they need to know when they need to be in the goal, acting as the proverbial goalie, if you will, even if only temporarily. So they always all play offense and they always all play defense. It's kind of just depends on where they're positioned at that exact moment in time.
All right. So now going into the competition for this season, we've had our record this year is 8-5. We're 1-2 and as far as our ECAC season, but we had a stellar win with our win against Bellarmine this year. Tell us about our players. We got our starting three with Jack Long, Cam May, and Jonathan Williams.
Yeah, so coming into the program in November, I was just told the Rocket League guys are crazy. They're really good. They've played with each other for a long time, and you'll see that the first day of practice. And sure enough, the first day of practice, they were doing things that I could never in a million years perform, and it just blew my mind. They're very talented. All the technical stuff that I was talking about in terms of angles and how to hit the ball and what part of the car to hit the ball with, they're incredibly good at. And just like with any team, they're still constantly working on learning different ways of doing it and learning different teamwork mechanics so that way they can ultimately end up improving. But Jack is currently our captain. And of the three players, he's the highest rated player on our team. They're all roughly around the same, but Jack sits at the top of that ladder. Then it's Cam, then it's John. And so Jack kind of leads the conversations in a lot of cases of where to improve, what to look for, and things like that. And John and Cam are both very responsive to it. There's no ego involved in this game. They objectively take in the information, try and become better for the next game. And I think that's one of their greatest strengths so far.
All right. And then, so now if we can go over to League of Legends, where that's our other team, where we got a few matches into the College Star League. Now we're up and running again, the ECAC, and we've won our first two matches in terms of that. Before we get into the dynamic of this season, let's talk about the game itself, where at least my understanding, it's kind of capturing the other team's base, the first team to do that.
Yeah, so for League, or League of Legends shortened to League, the game consists of 153 different characters, all of which have their own unique abilities and all of which have their own items that they like to build in the game. So there's a lot of different combinations kind of going on, a lot of different knowledge that goes into this game specifically. But the objective of the game is a 5-on-5 battle arena game. There's 3 different lanes. There's top lane, mid lane, bot lane, and then a jungle. And each player fills in the role. The bot lane ends up having 2 players in it. And the objective is to push all the way into the other team's base, destroy, their core, which is called the Nexus. You do so by killing these little minions and killing your opponents, killing objectives and turrets. So that way you can get gold to get items. The items make you as a character stronger, whether it be by bolstering your defenses, your attacks, your magic abilities, or your utility for the rest of your team. And there's a lot of technical know-how that goes into this one, especially with the mechanics similar to that of Rocket League, knowing how each champion interacts with one another, which champion counters another one, when to fight, when not to fight, how to fight, and how to play it out. There's a lot more that goes into this one, I personally think, than that of Rocket League.
Yeah, okay. One of the things that you and I have talked about before is the kind of distributing the opportunities for certain players to allow for some to get stronger, because that's what is most beneficial.
Yeah. So when it comes to the distribution of resources, like within the game itself, most of the time you have respective roles per lane. So like I said, there's a top, mid, and bot lane. Most of the time your top laner is going to be someone that's a little bit beefier, a little bit tankier, sitting on that front line. And so for them, acquiring resources, yeah, it's important, but it's not necessarily as important most of the time as that of your mid laner or your bot laner, who are the ones that are pumping out the damage, right? So if you can pump out more damage than the enemy team, more than likely you're going to end up winning the fight. If you win the fight, that means there's more gold in your pocket, which means you could do more damage and have more defenses. So that way, when the next fight comes around, you might even just end up winning the game. So trying to allocate where someone goes at any given time is incredibly important. We tend to refer to this as macro play. So the macro play of League of Legends is especially important. So that way you're getting these resources on the correct individuals. Otherwise, it's great to have someone that's incredibly tanky or incredibly supportive, but in team fights, it doesn't necessarily do anything for you, or around objective fights. So trying to master when is the right place to be at the right time is very difficult. We're constantly working on that, but it's something that I'm seeing great improvement with our players.
Okay, and then I know this is a big concept in League, the concept of a jungler. How to basically what is their role? Because that's definitely a very critical part.
Right. The jungler is so even though the game is PvE or PvP, pardon me, so player versus player in a lot of cases, um, the jungler does something kind of all on their own. Whereas the lanes, you constantly have vision of where they are, what they're doing, and so forth. So that way you have that knowledge. The jungler kind of sits in the shadows, plays a little bit of PvE. So player versus environment, they're playing just um, against monsters in the jungle. That gives them their level. So they're not taking resources from any of the other players. And then their objective is to apply pressure either on neutral objectives, so that of like the Rift Herald, the Dragon, Baron, Nasher, or to apply pressure into lanes by coming in and assisting, which we call ganking. So they gank a lane in order to either kill them, get a summoner spell out, or any other number of spells from the laner, so that way our players in turn gain some sort of advantage, whether that's fighting advantage or pressure advantage, so that way they can rotate. So the jungler is more or less someone that could be anywhere on the map at any given time, and they need to have the know-how as to where they should pressure, because that's what ultimately ends up getting some of the neutral objectives that later give you even stronger buffs than even that of your items.
Okay, and then and for the players who their role isn't necessarily to take resources, how is some of those players, how do they have to approach things differently?
The support role is the one that's most commonly stuck in this situation, and they gain resources by means of assists in kills, or supports have a special item that helps them generate gold. So most of the time, these characters can be useful without having a ton of items. So maybe their abilities provide a lot of CC, so a lot of crowd control, whether it be stuns, slows, roots, suppresses, or they just apply a lot of pressure in terms of they do a lot of damage without items, which I know might sound a little strange, but when you have these types of characters, that's what their usefulness is. Their usefulness is to buy time for their other players to get strong. And then once team fights come along and once the late game comes along, they're there in order to enable them to perform even better. So items are great on supports, but the characters are specifically designed so that way the items don't necessarily make them very powerful. Instead, they just help, whereas their main abilities are what make them powerful or useful in a lot of cases.
Okay, and then so now if we can kind of break down our League of Legends team, this is when when we got started, that League of Legends is kind of where we had our core. We kind of had our seniors. A few of them, we've got Sam Wells, Noah Schramm, Reese McDaniel. We got some others. Break down what we have for League of Legends.
Yeah, so we have, like you said, Sam Wells in the top lane, Jonathan Alfred in the jungle. We have Noah Schramm in mid lane, Reese McDaniel in AD carry role, and Jack Long, actually from the Rocket League team, is our support player. And on that team, Jonathan is actually our captain. So far, there's a pretty big skill discrepancy across this team as well, or I shouldn't say as well, but there's a big discrepancy, but everyone's working together to learn where their place on the team is specifically. They're constantly looking to improve. They recognize the skill discrepancy, and they want to close that gap. They're not only competitive against the other teams, but they're competitive amongst each other. They want to see who the best is on the team, and whoever the best is, they want to try and take them down. So that competitive drive is something that I appreciate as a coach, because it means that hunger, that thirst, that want to get better is constantly there. So I don't necessarily have to try and motivate them in that field. I just have to give them the tools necessary in order to get to that next level of play.
All right, so now let's go into Valorant. So that's it. So that one, it's another one that it's I can somewhat explain to a degree, where it's almost my understanding is you have a spike, and you have a spike, which is a kind of a bomb, and you want to on offense you want to try to explode the bomb, and on defense you want to try to defuse it. You can go elaborate more of this.
Sure. Valorant is a game that has, like you said, two sides to it. You're either attacking or defending. If you're attacking, you want to plant the bomb, and you want to let the bomb have enough time to get to the point that it detonates. If it detonates, then the attacker side win. If you're defending, you don't want the bomb to go off, and you want to try and clear out the entire enemy team before the spike explodes, or if they drop the spike, you want to defuse it. So that way your team wins. In this game, there are 14 different agents, all of which, again, have their own unique abilities. And then they have weapons that they purchase, most of which being guns, of course, of some sort or fashion. But it's a shooter game in a lot of senses, but it's also a strategy game in the sense that there's different maps, and on different maps, there's different pathways, and different pathways work best with certain abilities. Whereas League of Legends is on one map all the time, never changes. This one's a little bit more fluid with how it operates. So sometimes one character might be really good on one map, but maybe not so much on the next one. So our players have to try and be as versatile as possible in that regard. They have to know the pathways for 5 separate maps, and they have to know their own individual characters that they themselves are good at. So ultimately, if either team ends up wiping out the entire other team, they win the game, or at least that round. So the game goes until 13 rounds. Whoever gets 13 first wins. And at some point in the game, it's actually after 12 rounds, they end up switching sides. So just because you start on defending side does not mean that you never get an opportunity to attack. So it's very fluid, whereas League is, once you're in it, you're there. It's static, and you can't change too many things. Valorant has, like I said, 13 rounds. Each round can be drastically different than the last one, depending on how well you use your abilities, how well your shots end up hitting, and what your ultimate strategy is as a team.
Okay, and that's it. And like you said, it goes up to 13. You got to win by 2, and then it's a best 2 out of 3 within those.
That is correct.
So going into a little bit more of what is there more of like is there a strategy in terms of the shooting element of it?
So a lot of times, what I tell the players is to have their sights at head level. Most of the time, the guns in the game, if you hit someone with one shot to the head, it's an instant kill. No matter how much armor they have, no matter what items they have. Most of the time, if you hit them in the head with any item, you win, or at least you kill that individual. So that's more or less the only strategy that I kind of tell them right now, because beyond that, it's just be good at aiming, right? And that comes with practice, just like with, shooting a free throw. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So long as they kind of have that guideline of, okay, I need to aim at least at this level, they're going to start hitting those headshots. They're going to start winning those 1v1 fights, and it's going to give them the ultimate advantage in a lot of these rounds that they have to end up playing.
And then along with it, having the ability to get kills, it's almost more important to not get killed yourself. So what goes into teaching that kind of awareness?
So like we were talking about with the different sides. So you have an attacking side and a defending side. So as a defender, most of the time, your key thing is you need to be patient, because the attackers have to walk into you in order to plant the bomb. Well, if they have to walk into you, there's no need that you need to go guns blazing gung-ho into what would be their crosshairs or their line of sight. Instead, let them walk into you, so that way you have the advantage, right? You're not the one that's constantly looking around trying to process all the information that you're digesting. Instead, what you're trying to do is just react as soon as they turn a corner. And if they turn the corner and you win that fight, then you have an advantage. Whereas if you're attacking, a lot of times it's all about the strategy of where do we use our abilities, so that way we can gain information as to where they might be hiding, so that way we can end up having the surprise on them. So the game boils down to who has the most information and who can execute a certain strategy based on said information. Most of the time, defenders need to play a lot more patient than that of the attackers, and the attackers need to be a lot more strategic with their approach in order to bring out the defenders from their hiding spots, so that way they can get the spike on plant.
All right, so now let's talk about our personnel. What we have, we've actually got 2 Valorant teams competing. And they're one of the 2 teams that didn't get CSL action. So one, tell a little bit about with each team, and then how the transition has been.
Sure. With our Valorant team, the way that we kind of did it originally, they had a standalone tournament when I first got here. In fact, it was the second week that I was here, and it was brought together by a couple of students, and it consisted of Will Winston, Josh Huffman, Connor Zepik. Sorry, I definitely mispronounced Connor's name. Braden Michael, and trying to remember Mason Fridley. So the 5 of them ultimately decided, hey, you know what? There's a standalone tournament. Let's go ahead and let's try it out. Let's play it out. And they tried it, and they ended up losing in the first round, but they enjoyed it, the game itself. So we decided with the ECAC to try and get them enrolled, and that was kind of the basis for why we made one team, those 5 players. They had a little bit of playtime together. They're all friends from my understanding. And so allowing them to stay on the same team so that way they can grow and develop together as players, we thought was the best course of action as a team. I discussed this matter not only with them, but also with the other players on the team, or at least some of them, including our team captain. So that way we could try and figure it out. Because with the ECAC, once the rosters are locked in, you can't necessarily change them. So this was a conscious decision, at least for this conference, to keep those 5 together. As for the other 5, we have Damian Warham, we have Casey O'Brien, who's our captain. We have Logan, I'm going to mispronounce his name too, Zebriek, and Sky, who I don't have his last name on my screen, something. Right. But those were, not to say that they were the other players and they just kind of got put on a team, but they were the other 5 players that had just kind of come together. And so their innate synergy wasn't necessarily there. This guy's last name is Kramer, by the way. Apologies to him. but we put them all together because not only were they maybe a little less familiar with the game, but they hadn't been in a team setting like the other 5 had been before. So they thought that if they started from scratch, that would be better than having some sort of player with some sort of expectation on their team and then kind of mixing those things up, having that type of dynamic. We decided that that wasn't what we wanted, at least for now, because this is our first semester of truly competing in a conference. We decided that building up fundamentals and base knowledge of the game was significantly more important than creating a varsity and junior varsity team, if you will.
Right, and that's it. And in some schools have that, they have their A team and their B team, and that's not really what we have. It's more of a we've got our core. We don't want to break up a team because of how important some just teamwork and chemistry is in esports. Breaking that up would create a hindrance, even if it meant for putting quote unquote better players together.
Right. And so that might be something that we end up changing at a later date, or maybe in another semester. Maybe we do have a varsity team. Maybe we don't. This is all kind of a little bit of an experiment right now. The players are on board with it. I'm on board with it. And we're going to kind of see and feel out what we think is best at the end of the semester. Right now, consciously watching it, I'm making notes and looking for the improvement areas. But so far, I think it's working in some areas and the lackluster maybe in others. So we'll see what that ends up evolving into, or if it ends up staying the same moving forward.
Okay, and then our final one that there's probably going to be the most explained. Just get it's a little bit similar to Valorant, but there's a lot of different rounds and different game modes. So kind of, and I went to go and see this with you guys in person for our opener, breaking down the fundamentals for like what is Overwatch.
Yeah. Overwatch, like you said, the competition realm is a little bit more complicated. Again, I think League of Legends has the greatest knowledge base that needs to be had in order to perform at a really high level. But Overwatch's competition itself is a little bit more complicated. So with Overwatch, it's a best of 5, except there's 3 different game modes that are cycled through. So on top of those 3 different game modes, there's also a very big catalog of characters. I think there's 40 something. Don't quote me on that one, but there's a lot of characters, all of which, again, have their own abilities. Now, one of the differences between Overwatch and that of Valorant or that of League is there's no gold in the game. There's no sort of currency where the better you perform, the better items you can have. This game is purely skill-based, purely position-based. So if your team is positioned better than the others and you're dealing more damage, it has nothing to do with how well your performance was earlier in the game. It strictly has to do with your knowledge base and how you're executing on that knowledge base. And so the 3 different game modes, just to kind of give a brief overview, one of them is similar to that of King of the Hill, right? You have to control an area. Once you control it for a certain amount of time, another area spawns and you have to control that one. If you end up controlling both areas before the timer runs out, you win the game. One of the other ones is called Escort. So there's a payload and you have to stand by the payload in order for it to move forward. If you get it all the way to the end before the timer runs out, again, you win.
Real quick, you just for people who haven't seen, like, I know what it looks like, but basically describe what the payload is.
Sure. The payload, it depends on which map you're on, but more or less what it is a little like hover vehicle, if you will, or a tank in some cases. Again, it's all map dependent, but it is.
I think the one I saw was kind of like a mine cart on a track.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's some sort of vehicle that is carrying something, right? In a lot of cases, it ends up being, either bombs or heavy artillery, something of that sort, which is similar to that of like one of the spikes in Valorant. But again, depending on which map you're on, the cart actually carries something different in each one, or at least visually it's carrying something different.
And it's something you can push forward.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
so now I thought that was important, going back to the game mode itself. So
yeah, so again, if your team is around it, then it moves forward. If the enemy team is around it, it pushes backwards. So there are two sides for Escort. You have the attacking side and the defending side, similar to that of Valorant. And then in this game mode, you end up switching. So after one team pushes as far as they can and the timer runs out, the other team gets a chance to try and push it beyond that point. And if they push it beyond that point, they end up winning. So then the final game mode is hybrid. And it's a combination of those two. So the game starts out with a King of the Hill style capture the flag area. If your team ends up capturing that area, then the payload or a payload ends up unlocking. And now you escort the payload throughout the rest of the map. So it's almost like a half and half deal. And the same premise applies as with the other two game modes.
Okay. So now going into the roster that we have for Overwatch, that's another newly formed one that that's starting up.
Yeah, so the Overwatch team is new this semester. A lot of my players on this specific team are new as a whole, not only to Overwatch, but kind of just to video games in the competitive sphere in general, which is exciting, but it also presents its own complications. But of this team, we have Kedrick Neese, Michael Carroll, who's actually our captain, Emily, I'm going to mispronounce her name, Tragesser, Kayla Saunders, Caleb Spencer, Maddie Scheiderly, mispronounce her name too, and Reese McDaniel. So some of those players are new to the gaming sphere as a whole, which is great because this team in particular is very open to feedback. They're very open to different ideas and trying new things because they don't have any expectations and they don't have anything previously that they think is better, right? They don't have any prejudice in this matter. So it's really easy to help coach them, and it's really easy to kind of shape where I think they belong on the team and where the team other players think that individual belongs on the team. But due to the lack of experience, it's a little difficult to kind of instill game knowledge and game sense within a couple weeks, especially because with the ECAC, we ended up signing up a week before competition started. So with some of these teams, putting them together, forming them, I said, hey guys, do you want to be a part of a team? They said, yes. I said, great. You compete next Tuesday. And they all said, okay, cool. It was more or less a surprise, not only to them, but also to me in the fact that I have to start coaching this in a matter of, 4 days, 5 days, what have you. So it does present its own complications, but everyone is very willing to learn. And I'm very happy with the progress that they've made so far.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this, how we kind of had our surprises with the ECAC where we finished registration. And then it was like rocket for you, at least for me. We had just finished the CSL season. We closed that out, and then our Rocket League starting the very next day into a completely new league. You had something similar.
Yeah, they ended up, the Rocket League team, they were supposed to play 3 games in a row, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, one on Monday. If I remember correctly, one of the teams ended up falling through, unfortunately, for...
Oh, they played there. They played all 3.
Oh, maybe they did.
Yep, they did.
Maybe it's the league team I'm thinking of instead that didn't end up playing on one of those days. But yeah, it was quite hectic. That was a very busy week. We were all in the lab a lot.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing and a bad thing. Luckily, our players ended up pulling through. It didn't discourage them. It didn't demoralize them. In fact, they were raring to go. They wanted more games. They wanted to be more competitive with it. So I'm very happy with the fact that all 3 of my Rocket League players were ready for the challenge.
So now what is your what it and then this is going to be kind of jumping, this is going to be different from team to team, I'm sure, but what is each team's expectation as far as the ECAC? I think even for the teams who competed in the Collegiate Star League, some of them were seeing a little bit a lot more veteran teams that we're going against in terms of competition wise. So what is everyone looking like for this year?
So with our Rocket League team, we'll just start with them. They, in the CSL, in the Collegiate Star League, they were playing against players that were the league that they were initially enrolled in wasn't meant for individuals such as themselves. They're at the top of the play. They're at the top of the ranked ladder. And so for them, they're looking for more competitive games in the sense of they want someone that's on their level. Sure, it's fun to win, with a 10 plus score lead, but ultimately it doesn't make much for a competition, right? It gives you a good pick me up, it gives you a good feel good, but in terms of your own growth as a player, it doesn't provide a whole lot. And so they were looking for that challenge. They wanted that challenge. So for them, that's what the ECAC is right now. They have this challenge. They have people that are at their level, some of which are even higher level of play. And so learning and looking to improve is their goal. Whereas League of Legends, they're divided up pretty well. The ECAC does a good job for League of having different divisions. And so for them, they want games that are a little bit closer to them as well, but in a different sense. When they were playing in the CSL, they had players they had teams that were diamond level players plus. Well, for us, we don't necessarily have that, which isn't a big deal, but it's the exact opposite of Rocket League. It's not fun to go up against people that are incredibly high level players and end up being on the losing end of that, right? So they're looking for something that's a little bit more their pace, a little bit more competitive, so that way they too can look to improve, but they're not going up against a mountain in terms of differences here. They want those incremental increases here and there, so that way as a team they can grow instead of halting growth because, whatever reason they might have. As for Valorant and Overwatch, I think both of their expectations are kind of the same. They're looking to find their own identity. They haven't played these games together. A lot of them haven't even played the game prior to actually joining the conference. So with that being the case, they kind of just want to see what it's like to work in an esports team-based environment, and they want to see where that leads to. They want to see kind of where they fit in the program. They want to see what competition feels like in just competitive video games, whereas the other two teams have already seen it, done it, and now they're looking for the next level above that.
And then going back to Valorant and Overwatch, I know for at least with the Overwatch match, since I was there in person as with you, where they in their opener they went against a team that was a lot better than them, but in spite of that, it was something that the feedback was pretty much they had a lot of fun, and maybe you got some of that in Valorant as well.
Yeah, so it kind of varies depending on each player, right? Some players really want to win. Others are there for the sake of having fun and playing the game. At the end of the day, all of my players, or at least the ones that I've talked to, which is all of them at this point, they just want to play the games, right? They want to be there. They want to be part of this team. And the losses, like you said, they still hurt, especially with the Overwatch team. I know that was a lot of them. It wasn't fun to lose in the way that they lost, but a lot of them still saw the bright side. They still saw that, yeah, we're having fun, we're enjoying this. And the fact that we got to come together as a team and as a sense of community, that meant something to them beyond the loss itself. The Valorant teams is also kind of where we're sitting. There are a little bit more frustrations because each round is short, when those start to pile up, it feels like more of a loss than that of Overwatch, which has 3 different game modes and you're constantly switching. So we're constantly working on it. We're looking to see where we can improve. But overall, when I talk to my players, they're all very happy about kind of where they are. They want to keep looking to press their limits, their teammates' limits, and just be the best they possibly can before the end of the season.
All right. Well, I think I've covered all my questions. Ravens fans, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow along with your Anderson University esports team. That's twitch.tv/AndersonU esports. We will be competing regularly. So we have Rocket League competes regularly on Mondays. Valorant regularly competes on Tuesdays. And then Overwatch is on Wednesdays. Each of those are at 8:00 p.m. And then our League of Legends teams on Saturdays. Those will typically air Saturdays at 3 p.m. And then be sure to follow along with more of those updates. Coach Burnstedt, am I missing anything?
We actually did change our League of Legends time. So the games are actually played on Saturdays. However, we're going to be broadcasting, for the sake of who we have on staff for the broadcast staff, we're going to be broadcasting the games on Thursday at 8 p.m. So that way we can kind of keep the trend that's going on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So now we have Monday through Thursday, 8 p.m. That's when we'll have our games aired. It'll just be dependent on which game you're tuning into.
And then is that going to be live, or is that going to be a re-air?
So that's going to be a re-air. That takes Dr. Lambright and myself. We're going to be calling the game, casting the game, so that way we can kind of provide a little bit more insight, just because there's so much involved in the game. And luckily he and I have spent so much time in the game that we can speak intelligently about it. So instead of trying to get someone up to the task in a very rapid manner, we just decided to take that on ourselves. So.
All right. That sounds good. Be sure to follow along with everyone. And Coach Burnstedt, thank you for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.